We're Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld, co-founders of CultureCon. Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast, Culture Starts Here.
This content series is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Advisa, a Midwest-based consultancy helping CEOs, HR leaders, and managers transform workplace culture.
In each episode, Advisa CEO Heather Haas and leadership consultant BJ McKay dive into practical ways to initiate and sustain the culture you need to drive growth and success at your organization.
The Culture Starts Here series starts now.
All right, welcome to Culture Starts Here on the CultureCon podcast, where we talk about practical ways leaders can help their organizations thrive. As always, I'm BJ McKay, leadership consultant with Advisa, and I'm joined always by Heather Haas, our CEO. Hi, Heather.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or whenever it is that you're listening to this, but glad to be here.
Yeah, as you can see, there's a guest here, and today's topic might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but leaders need to be led. Not because leaders are lacking, but because leadership is too important and often too complex to do in isolation. So, Heather, comments on that?
No, I mean, everything we're about is coming alongside leaders to help them be more effective, activating the culture that will help them achieve their business goals. So we're really excited this morning to be joined by one of our best clients. So John D'Addario, glad you're here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you guys.
Yeah, thanks, John. Well, before we get into the leadership and culture piece, which I know folks listening are eager to get to, can you give our listeners a little bit of a broader context for people who may not know D'Addario and what you make, who you serve, and maybe something that might surprise people?
Sure. So we're the world's largest designer, manufacturer, and distributor of musical instrument accessories. That ranges from guitar strings to a wide range of guitar accessories like picks, capos, tuners, straps, just about any guitar accessory you could think of. In addition to that, we have a portfolio of percussion accessories, including Evans drum heads, ProMark drumsticks, and a wide variety of other percussion-related accessories. And then the third component of our business is what we call band and orchestral, which is a range of orchestral strings for violin, viola, cello, and upright bass, as well as a range of accessories for woodwind instruments, reeds, mouthpieces, and other things. So a pretty vast portfolio of accessories, and accessories are what we're known for, of course, and small goods that are replaceable and consumable. We are a global business. We distribute our products in over 130 countries worldwide. And in many countries, we actually have our own distribution company set up. And what's interesting is that people think that the music industry is massive, and it really is quite small compared to most. So people are pretty surprised by that. It includes a lot of family businesses, including ours, of course. We're a family business. And in many cases, those family businesses struggle with succession planning. It's actually what's motivated our family to be very serious and disciplined around that, and which is why we're multi-generational. So people are surprised. It's a small, mostly family-oriented business, which we really love and really cherish.
Excellent. Well, I want to transition in a second into your story and your path into the business, like growing up in it, into CEO. Before I want to do that, I don't want to steal thunder from down further in our conversation, but I was on your website learning about the family, and can you tell us about the family assembly that you get together? I thought that was really neat. I'd never heard of that, so would love to hear about it.
So, I actually represent the fourth generation of D'Addarios that have been in business in the U.S. My great-grandfather emigrated here in 1905. But our family history in terms of string manufacturing goes back to the late 1600s, believe it or not. Now, why do we have a family assembly, and why are we so serious about succession planning? Well, it actually stems from an experience or negative experience that my father and his younger brother Jim had with their father, my grandfather John Sr. John Sr. actually sold the family's business at one point to the C.F. Martin Company, Martin Guitars. The company was called Darco and widely known for guitar string manufacturing. And Martin wanted to secure their supply of strings. So it made a lot of sense for them to buy the business. But my grandfather quickly realized that it was a mistake because he really liked to have the autonomy of running his own business, and that he sacrificed that. Interestingly, Jim and my father were working in the same division. My father was more of an operations manager, and Jim was more of a sales and marketing representative. And they also recognized that my grandfather was very upset about the decision he made. He thought it was in the best interest of the family, but he quickly realized it wasn't. So what ended up happening is Jim and my father eventually left the business, and interestingly, the Martin family decided not to contest their non-compete. So they started their own string manufacturing company. And eventually my grandfather actually moved to help them with that new business, but they really had different philosophies in terms of the business. My grandfather was much more traditional, and Jim and my dad were more progressive, and it led to a lot of conflict. And so Jim and my father did not want to put the next generation through the same experience. So they actually, I think it was in the late 90s, they hired a family business advisor. And that person helped us with a lot of disciplines to put in place, like establishing a board and having an annual family assembly and ongoing communications in between those. So the objective of the family assembly is multifaceted. For one, it aligns the family around the strategic direction of the business. Number two, it concentrates on succession planning, literally preparing people like myself for future stewardship in the business, whether I'm working in the business or just being an owner of the business. It's a responsibility. And we teach the whole family that it's a privilege to have a family business and be an owner of a family business. But more importantly, it's a responsibility, especially to the employees that are part of the business, which become an extension of our family. So we meet every single year. We update the family on what's going on in the business. We talk about strategic direction, and we talk a lot about, the next generation and preparing them. And the next family assembly is actually early July. We're getting together for a couple of days. And at the table will be literally three generations of the Daria family. My father and Jim's generation, my generation, which we call G4, again, fourth generation in the US, and now many, many G5 members that are a part of it. So we're really excited about that.
Wow, what a great way to, and honestly, just for the folks that aren't as connected to day-to-day business, like having a still thumbprint on protecting that legacy, hanging on to what's most important and what makes us special. And that's a good transition over to your path. Because I know we work a variety, and we speak to a lot of folks who think about succession planning. You have businesses, you have family that, like, how's this going to play out? So I'd love for you to share more about like your path into the business and eventually into the CEO role, like that career journey for you.
You got it. So out of college, I had the opportunity to work outside of the family business for a period of time, roughly 3 years, in, believe it or not, the cosmetics industry.
Oh, wow.
Cosmetics, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and that was a phenomenal experience for me in the sense that it gave me a completely different perspective outside of the family business. It enabled me to learn a lot about myself and to be more self-aware, what my strengths and weaknesses were. And what's interesting is that having that different perspective was invaluable to me. And now we're encouraging the next generation to pursue opportunities like that. So, for example, my son, John 4, just recently, last weekend, graduated from college, and he has a job lined up down in North Carolina working for a financial firm. And I can't tell you how excited I am for that. He's passionate about the family business, but this will give him a great opportunity to learn about a different business and get a different perspective. So having that background was invaluable to me. But when I did enter the business, then I brought some of those, the learnings from that. And in working with a family business advisor, I was advised to go through a lot of different training programs that really hone my skills. I have to say, one of the more enlightening things for me was a kind of a 360-degree review of myself in the eyes of my colleagues, not only family members, but also people I would work with that are non-family. And it was awesome because it gave me more of an awareness about how people perceive me and what things I probably could work on, or even things that I could leverage and strengthen. Another great experience in terms of honing my skills, our family business advisor advised me to join a program called Next Generation Leadership Institute, which was in Loyola College in Loyola University in Chicago. It was an 18-month program, and I actually had a class of about a dozen people that were in the same position that I was, an emerging leader in a family business that was working through a generation transition. That was invaluable to me because I was able to create a network of people I could bounce things off of, but also, really help me hone my skills. So in terms of my progression through the business, I mean, I've gone through so many different responsibilities. I started as a production planner. I was a brand manager. I was sales leadership for a long period of time. Elevated to executive vice president, eventually president, and then just prior to the pandemic, I was named CEO of the company.
Oh,
Great
congratulations.
timing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
impeccable timing. But I got to tell you, that experience, of course, as much of a struggle it was for us as a business, like a lot of business to survive that period of time, it was another invaluable experience for me as a leader. And it really taught me about being very intentional about how I led, to really have really tight communication around what was happening, keep people informed because there were so many unknowns happening at the time. So that really continued to hone my skills as a leader, and really helped me in the eyes of other people, feeling that they were in good hands in terms of the future of the business because I succeeded my uncle Jim as CEO at that time, and continue to learn. Since that time, and I always will learn. It's one of the things that I always feel really strong about. Learning's never done. You have to continue to have an open mind around that.
That's an incredible story. And what strikes me is that, the title of this episode, Leaders Need to Be Led. You've already named several moments where you sought the counsel of someone outside the business to come in and provide perspective, advice, and then also seeking out the outside learning. So I'm curious, John, we've worked with you recently, and, culture has bubbled up as something that's important to the success of your business. Tell us about why, again, looking outside for some support, some resources, for maybe refreshing or redefining or activating your culture.
We actually have a discipline of running an engagement survey just about every year. We did one in 2024. Our engagement score was quite high. I think it was 82 at the time. And then what of course we took the feedback very seriously, and one of the more widely recognized things through the survey was that our employees really wanted more learning opportunities. Really wanted more leadership development opportunities. And that came across loud and clear to us. So we did a lot of research on different resources to help us further that initiative. And Advisa was one that came to the surface and quite prominently. And so what we ended up doing is we identified many of our high potential future leaders of the business, those people that really not only had potential but had the desire to really further their career path. And we engaged Advisa on a leadership fundamentals curriculum. But in parallel to that, what I thought was very valuable to us was we had our executive team go through a leadership academy experience, right in parallel with it, and that was phenomenal because we were learning about culture and the value of culture together, and we were able to collaborate together with the future leaders of the company. And our business is very global in nature, and when we transitioned from my uncle's generation to mine, the business has changed dramatically. When my uncle was running the business, he was more of a command and control person, and he led by example. And business was much smaller and simpler for somebody to do that. But I realized, and as a CEO of the company, I can't do that. The business is too complex, it's too global, and so you have to be more intentional in terms of how you lead, how you ingrain your culture and your values of your company. And I got to tell you, that's something that really I personally took away from the experience with Advisor was that recognition that I need to be more intentional because we have a global business. We have 1,100 people as employees, about 200 or so are international employees, and they don't see me and the rest of the executive team every day or the family every day. So I got to make a concerted effort to communicate with them, reinforce the values, reinforce the value of our culture to them. Geographically, it's challenging to do that, obviously, but that has to be top of mind. And to be honest with you, another thing that I took away was that we always see competitive advantages. We have a competitive advantage in terms of our manufacturing prowess. We design, program, and build a lot of our own equipment. So we have incredible intellectual property around that and controlling that. We're highly vertically integrated. We do a lot of things that we control, like we print our own packaging. We make our own raw materials in many cases. So that's another competitive advantage. But I got to tell you, the big thing I took away from this experience with Advisor was that we need to make culture a competitive advantage. We're fortunate because we have a great culture, but we can't be complacent around that. We need to continue to reinforce the value of that to our existing employees and any employees we're looking to bring into the organization.
Can I linger on something here, John, that I think could be helpful? I was in a conversation yesterday with a company that's they have generational leadership as well. And I think going into something like that, there could be a defensiveness, kind of a holdback, because we already have a strong culture. Like, we're still here, we're existing, we have multiple layers, people with the same last name running the business, and we have all these financial and otherwise signs of success. So there's this tension of like, we're already winning. With the recognition, as you grow, the new leadership tends to understand, like, we want to maintain that, but we have to do some things differently, or else we're going to fade away. Like, the specialist has to pour through. So when you get into these situations, I guess what was already strong in the culture, like, we need to preserve this, and what was maybe something different, new, or a different angle that might have come up through this process that you might not have thought about before as your leadership team got together.
Yeah, well, first of all, the business as it grew over the course of time, in my experience, became much more complex, and we quickly realized that the family and the family alone can't run it, and we needed to surround the family that was involved in the business with really capable leaders, and capable leaders that embraced our culture and our values, right? So one value in particular that I think is the most profound for our business is curiosity. Curiosity in the sense that, the people that we bring into the business, we need them to be innately curious about how a product can be better, how a process can be better, how they can be better as a leader. And so, having that established and really, in top of mind helps us kind of vet people that we ultimately will bring into the business, making sure that they represent that. And so the thing that's changed over the course of time is that, our families, they're control freaks. They really want to be in control of the business. But again, the business is gotten to the point where it's so global, so complex, so much bigger that you got to make a sacrifice a little bit on that control, but at the same time try to continue to ingrain that same culture, that you have. And I got to tell you, one of the big takeaways from the experience with Advisa was that we revisit our values. We didn't change them, but what we did change is how we describe them. And probably one of the biggest things for me was that we ultimately honed in on the fact that family is a value of ours, and that should be the top value. We should lead with family because, again, it's a family business, but we can't run this business that exists today, given its complexity, without other people that are not in the family, but we consider family, and they think like the family in terms of how they act in the business, how they present themselves, and the decisions that they ultimately make. It's as if it's with their own money, and that's something that we always have felt very strongly about. And that's the reason why we're very transparent about all the financials and all the, strategy in the business, because we feel like our family of employees need to be a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's jumping out to me that first, the recognition that culture could be a competitive advantage, just like all of your intellectual property and all of your, strategic plans is unreal. And then the way that your values have become part of the common language. So talk a little bit about, defining them, refreshing them, making sure we're talking about them in the same way. That's important, but say a little more about how we hold people accountable to those values, how we celebrate when people are living them out, because that's really what starts to shape the culture in a distributed or a global business where you're not actually touching the sheep every day, right? You don't see you, they don't maybe see members of your family. How do you make sure that the leaders in the middle of the organization and even on the front lines know how to coach, hold people accountable to those values?
Yeah. So, part of our review process is literally reflecting on the values and how people hopefully resemble those values, and that's something that we feel really, really, really strongly about. Going back to what the work that we did is we didn't feel like how we were describing the values was as succinct and as clear as we needed it to be for people. And one of the things that we need to work on, honestly, and it's something that's a fault of our family, is that we don't do enough to recognize, accomplishments. Like, we'll accomplish something, but we're already moving on to the next thing, and we don't ever reflect and celebrate, what's been done. And so that's something that we've learned, is that we need to celebrate more when somebody truly resembles our values. Like curiosity as an example. How did they showcase curiosity in a particular through a particular initiative. So that was a big thing for us, especially through the leadership training that we went through recently with Advisa, is that we've got to celebrate more. We've got to recognize people more. That helps you reinforce those values ultimately as part of your culture.
This is playing back. It actually connects to this a little bit, but I looked at some previous interviews that you were in, and then something jumped out to me in one of them that I wanted to linger on that connects to about this, which is you'd said, and this is paraphrase, that no family member gets a role simply because of their last name. And so I guess, I mean, that's a bold statement. I mean, a lot of people say things like that, but I guess how do you uphold that standard, like emotionally, when family is involved? Like you can't change, like, hey, we're doing Christmas and Thanksgiving and holidays together, and then we're going to go put on our work hat and work, and then measure out accountabilities like this, accountabilities to values and all those things.
Yeah, you mentioned emotions, and certainly with a family business, there's emotions. There's no shortage of that. But the thing I've learned is that you cannot let emotions make your ultimate decisions for the business. That's paramount, in terms of how you run the business. That's something that I feel really really strongly about ultimately. And in terms of positions in the business, I think there's about a dozen family members right now that work in the business actively, each of which is in vastly different roles. But ultimately, how they get into those roles, we have a process. But at the end of the day, they need to earn that role, and they need to be very prepared and capable for that role. And it won't be a role that we invent for someone. They have to earn it. And I'm proud to say that over the years, people saw me do the hard work, and saw that I was working towards earning, the roles that I had in the organization. And that's the same with the rest of the family. And they're held accountable as employees of the business, right? But they're also held accountable as shareholders in the business. And our family assembly, when we get together, that's something that we constantly reinforce, is that whether you're an employee of the company or not, you have a responsibility. And it's in your best interest as an employee to do the right thing, and to earn what roles that you have in the business. And if you're not in the family, you have to look at things through a different lens, being that you have to be a responsible shareholder and steward of the business. So we're not creating roles for family members. They need to earn it and need to prepare for them, just like any employee would.
Right. It's better for them too, right? Once they get the role, the level of credibility and respect that they're able to command because they earned it is far and away more than if they had just been given. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Yes.
And pressing into that just one more moment, if I'm a leader listening to this right now, and I'm not like as far along as you are, I might be in the mess of I'm in the emotional soup. Yes, we have mission, vision, values. They're there, but they're not as crystal. They're not as tight as what you have to like the accountability layers in there. It's been proven. Like you went in there and earned it. They watched you earn it. What advice would you give me? I'm a second or third generation leader, and I'm in this mess right now, and I don't have right now the handles that you put in place. Like, what would be this next step, and maybe the next step for me if you were mentoring me through this?
What I would say is that don't be afraid to seek help, seek resources that can help you. Like going back to what I mentioned before about my father and my uncle, they recognized that they didn't want to put the family through a similar, transition challenge. So they enlisted the help of a family business advisor, right? They weren't afraid to do that. More recently, we enlisted the help of advisor to help us hone our skills. I got to say, both the Leadership Academy and the Leadership Fundamentals group, it really having that experience together and learning together, it galvanized the group around things that we needed to work together on and row in the same direction to overcome challenges and realize opportunities. So seeking different perspectives and help on the outside, don't be afraid to do that. Ultimately, in the long run, it'll serve you well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like to say is that learning is a container for change. So hearing you talk about the galvanizing experience of being in those rooms together over time to talk about, skills and topics, but then you've got that rich norming and aligning that can happen because you're all learning the same thing at the same time and applying it to real business challenges that you're facing back on the job.
You talked about succession plan. That's a big part of our thread line through what makes the Dario special. You've thought about this. What conversations do you think families, like the family run business, like avoid or try to stay away from and leave to the side that eventually become most expensive to them downstream?
Yeah. So another one of our values is candidness. So we try to be very candid. What's a challenge, of course, is if you have conflicts and disagreements within a family, right? And then naturally that's going to come up. But because we have this discipline of meeting regularly as a family, through the family assembly annually and also in between, and working with a family business advisor, that helps us provide the family with a forum where they can air out those differences and work through them. I just had a meeting this morning with members of G4. We have a regular meeting just as a G4 generation, and we were talking about the most recent board meeting that we had, and some of the opportunities that we have in front of us and some of the challenges that we have in front of us. And we don't always agree on those things, but having the ability to have a forum like that where you can openly discuss those things is invaluable. So that's really served us well. And again, you're always going to have conflicts in the family, but if you provide more of an open, candid environment where they can air out these differences of opinion, it's a healthy way of approaching, as opposed to keeping them unsaid. That's really a cancer for a family business.
When it's like we're in these organizations, like in any organization, but when you get to senior leadership, people have been around you even outside of family business, and there are loyalty blind spots that show up. Like it's hard to necessarily, what am I not seeing? And it sounds like you built in some rhythms, whether it's the family assembly, you built all these rhythms to give a forum for the candor. Like this is the purpose of this conversation. We're not going to get better if we don't talk about things, whether I'm pointing out things, John, that you might be missing or that we might be missing. Or do you see what's happening down here? It sounds like if we have those things installed, we're going to catch things early before they become the real toxic, like nuclear thing that happens to families on occasion.
Yeah, and the great thing about, again, having the whole family together, including G5, my children's generation and their cousins, is that they see that.
Yeah, you're setting the example.
Exactly, and they say that that's a healthy way of addressing those differences of opinions. For example, that's invaluable in terms of our next level of succession planning.
Yeah. And a couple more questions before we tie this together. You talked about the work with Advise. You talk about work that's been done, whether it's like the next generation leadership that you went to. Have a recognition that I want to go through a program and kind of get with peers and learn how to do this. Like the family group that worked with your team, and then now Advisa with the work that you've done. Like there's been this progression through the generations of this type of behavior. That's great. So looking into right now, how do you take the values, like you have your values, and like, can you give us some examples of how that's turned into day-to-day behaviors? Like we've named a value. You brought up curiosity. You brought up family, and there's others. How do you measure me on that? Like, what do I do? How do I demonstrate whether it's family or curiosity day to day when you get to my evaluation at one point or another and give me feedback?
Literally, how you interact and present yourself, let's say with customers or vendors, you need to resemble those values, and we need to point out when if there was a case where you did not, right? And that shouldn't take a performance review to do it. It really should be an ongoing forum for feedback like that. So we look at every employee through the lens of those values. Right. And, unless we point out to them that they're not resembling them, then we're holding the whole business back and that person individually. The values that we have in the organization, another takeaway that I took from the advisor experience was that leaders or future leaders in the business can't be successful unless they embrace the culture and those values. And you can't just like expect that to happen by osmosis. You have to lead by example and showcase to them that you're only going to be successful in this particular culture if you really embrace these values and talk it through if you feel like they're not resembling them. So communication is so important. I mean, people tend to shy away from those types of discussions, but what you have to recognize is that unless you have that discussion, you're doing a disservice to the person that's working the business and the business in general. And it's so important for a global business as well, because we have people all over the world. And again, you have to be more intentional with those people given the geographic challenges you have.
For sure. You have to communicate even more frequently, more clearly.
It's
Um,
never enough.
it's never enough. Yeah.
And I love that the things that I'm taking away if I'm listening to this isn't a one-time initiative. Like I don't hear you talking about, we did this retreat and it changed everything. We did this one thing and it changed everything. You've done those things, but your team's effectively mapped that back to weekly, monthly, annual moments that just keep showing up, that the fly will never stop spinning. So there's no real room for fall off. There's no real room for, we got to reset. We've gone off target. We've gone here. It's in a rhythm that seems to be working really, really well. for you and the team as you map the future?
If you ever had the opportunity to work on the business, you'll quickly realize that a big part of our culture is continuous improvement. We're always looking for a way for a product to be better, a person professionally to be better, a process to be better. So that's invaluable to us. It's like this never be satisfied mentality that's ingrained, and it needs to continue to be reinforced in the business, and that's become a competitive advantage for us at the end of the day as part of a culture.
Excellent. Well, I have one more question before we wrap up, and it's this. You're carrying the leadership right now of the Dario in your your G4, right? You're G4. What would you hope in G5 and even G6? Like, what do you hope they will say about your leadership during your tenure? What would you want them to say about what they learned from you and what they saw happen under your leadership as CEO?
I would say that it would be my leadership style, my empathy for people, the way I communicate with not only the family but with other employees, the respect that I have at all times. It's something that my father ingrained in me and the rest of my siblings, is to be have the utmost respect for people. And you know what? One of the things that I would like them to see too is that I'm a good coach to them, as they show an interest in the business and then learn about the business, and to be a resource to them and be remembered for that. And that's something that I'm excited about. It's already starting to happen. I actually learned a lot about coaching techniques through my Advisa training experience that will help me in that regard and helping the next generation, getting them prepared for the future leadership in the business. So I'm really excited about that. But I want them to remember me as a trusted coach in that respect.
That's incredible. I mean, your story is very inspiring. And, we talk a lot about it's possible to be a high performing organization that can succeed and thrive over time without compromising culture. Because sometimes that tension is really hard. If you want to be a place where people love to work, it's hard to hold people accountable and let people go when they're not a fit, or give people the tough feedback, or vice versa. You talked about the transition from that command and control to a much more involvement first leadership style and a coaching first leadership style. Performance is still important, but also the cultural competitive advantage can ride along with it. So your story is such a great example of that, John. Thank you so much for your partnership with us and willingness to share.
Thank you. I appreciate the experience.
Well, hey, as we close the series, I want to come back to the question for those listening at the center of this episode. Who's leading you? Who's helping you step back, like we've heard about John today, test your thinking, and to help you grow as a leadership team for the people that you lead? So as you're building your own leader-led culture, listening to this, anytime you can use consultation, or you want an input, or you want some data to throw out there to start addressing some of the things that John talked, he's so far ahead of us, or where do I even start? Wherever you're at in that journey, we'd be happy to help you at Advisa with our team. And that's advisa.com, ADV as in Victor, ISA.com. We're easy to get a hold of. And as always, I'm BJ McKay, and I'm with
Heather Haas.
And culture
Starts here.
Thanks, everybody.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, a teammate, or a fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you want more ways to stay connected and inspired, check out our upcoming events page for a full listing of webinars, workshops, and conferences.
You'll find the link in the show notes, and we'd love to welcome you to a CultureCon event soon.
Until next time,